Institute, which is a big thing in computer security industry, which I'm not I don't know too much about, but you did come from that space. You didn't just came out of nowhere and then boom invent Bitcoin, right? You did come from some sort of network security, law enforcement.
From a certification point of view, I'm that crazy guy who has practically everything, or had. I'm the only person to have gotten the 3 platinum level certifications at SANS. No one else ever. Everyone gives up after one, apart from me, because, well, I'm a little bit insane that way. Magic. It's magic wine here, not magic crypto. But it's interesting how people like to have this anti-law thing. And that's why they don't want me, because I did the judge-prosecutor training in Australia. Charles Sturt University is a small university that everyone ignores. It also just happens to, one of the colleges is the New South Wales Police Academy. So cypherpunks don't like that aspect. I worked with police in a number of cases. I worked doing network analysis, taking down child grooming networks. And I worked doing things, taking down peer-to-peer file sharing networks. And everyone goes, oh, RIA's evil, they're doing these things and these poor people. The average network that I took down was turning over $10 million a day. So they weren't some free guy at home. And most of them were funding other crimes. They were using this for money laundering, by having people sign up and send money in to buy illegal movies. Some of these funded child porn, some of them funded people smuggling. Some of the guys that were associated with one of the Apple TV, which had nothing to do with Apple, by the way, it was just called Apple TV, a Chinese group, were heavily into taking people from Eastern Europe, women, and if they were too old, they would basically put them into kitchens and things like this. And if they were younger, they would sell them to sex slavery. This is what peer-to-peer file sharing led to. Everyone sits there going, oh no, it's only I'm downloading a few movies. I actually worked on criminal cases involving some of these things, and the money was used so that they could launder proceeds of selling people into slavery. That's the industry that everyone sort of says, oh, well, it's only a few movies. So, yes, that's my past. I'm the guy who took down all those naughty networks and went to court and acted with police. Sorry.
Okay, so no, not to harp on the dark side of the internet age, which of course there's a lot. The dark side is much bigger than any of us in the law-abiding side ever could imagine, obviously, because we don't see it. I mean, when the law works, we don't see it.
Like the child porn network taken down the other day, 357 people were arrested. It's not small. That's a large organization.
So to take the flip side of this, and to sort of end the official question and answer, and then we can open up to the audience. This is all the negative of like the internet, and we've talked about Bitcoin and how potentially it could.
And it's negative because the way that we do money on the internet is broken, and it has been the whole time. And I used to actually respect people like Peter Thiel and whatever, because when they started PayPal, they did it for this reason. They did it to make a system of peer-to-peer money that would enable internet commerce without all the problems. And that disappeared. We've earned enough, who cares? I mean, sorry, you've got an obligation. You've made that money, you work, you do what you promised.
And so they sold, which is actually, the topic of proof of stake systems, right? The ability to just exit, right, is always like a liability for everybody left on the platform. But let's talk about then your vision of Bitcoin in the future? Because one thing that Bitcoin community, as it is today, lacks versus the say Ethereum community is everybody in Ethereum is like full of enthusiasm, full of like big ideas, rainbows, like utopian future sort of ideas, which is very good.
I disagree. We've got lots of those right now. We have hundreds of applications popping up on SV.
Which will, if we have time, we
But this
will
is the
have.
problem with plumbing. Everyone loves plumbing while it works and only complains when it doesn't. And unfortunately, Bitcoin SV and the nodes and all the rest has just been working. So no one's complaining.
So do you see then Bitcoin SV being able to say, take all that energy, positive energy from developers, from industry people, from innovators, businessmen, entrepreneurs, and building all this stuff that in the right way?
I know a lot of people say that's what we should do, but I don't really care. I want it to be plumbing. At the end of the day, I want Google knowing that they can charge without advertising, which will actually make them many times actually more profitable. So it makes sense to someone like that to get rid of the ads and stop selling our information. I want everyone out there not to care that it's BSV. I want them to care that they're earning money and building something that enables and connects people. I don't really think that going, it's BSV, that's not the purpose of why I did this. I'm not here to sell a coin. I'm here to enable people to build things that change the way the internet works. That simple.
Okay, so on that note, let's open up to a couple of questions. All right, since you already went once before, I'll give it to this man back here.
Thank you very much. Since we are in Tokyo tonight, and Bitcoin, Japan seems to be a special place for Bitcoin, and there are, so can we have advice from you to the people in the industry and businesses in Japan?
So I grew up on Japanese culture, and not only manga and things. I was sort of educated in martial arts and everything like that by a man, Masatasu, who died back in the 90s, unfortunately. But back in the 80s and 90s, Japan was everything to the world. Japan was this big up-and-coming thing. And its banks let it down. They did. Why? Because no transparency, not the right reporting, all the shady deals. Japan has a lot of promise. It innovates. There are huge innovations here. I mean, there are some world-changing organizations that have set the way that the world moves forward. Toyota changed the entire global car industry. Sony has changed the music industry. All of these for the better. So Japan has always embraced technology. We now have a technology that will enable Japan to have regulatory control of the banks and know what's happening and not do all the bad problems of the past in the financial system. If it can do that, if it can have plumbing that enables it to open up the internet now in a new way, to sell secure Internet of Things devices, not a few, trillions of them, to have a technology that will allow all of that to happen, to build all the silicon for that. That's something where basically Japan can actually take the position that it promised us it was going to do in the 90s. So that's my challenge, to go for it, Japan.
Sorry, my second question. So I'm a bit of a crypto nerd, back in 2011, introduced by Chris Martinson. Love and hate relationship with Mt. Gox, but we'll forget about that. So my question is back on the regulatory aspect. So We've got groups of developers essentially controlling the code, significantly influenced by mining operations. How do we see that evolving in the future when historically governments have been in control of currency, and if this is a replacement for currency? I mean, I know it's only early days, but how do you reconcile
It's not a
that?
replacement for currency.
Okay, great.
That's where it's
Provocative.
wrong. It's a micropayment system. So I've never said anything bad about banks. Bitcoin does not replace banks. Banks provide a needed service. The unbanked don't get banked because of Bitcoin. You don't get a home loan because you have Bitcoin. You don't get a lease because you have Bitcoin. You don't raise capital to start that new hairdresser, plumber, hardware store because of Bitcoin. You're not going to ever have ICOs to have your local hardware store. Ain't going to happen. Bitcoin is something different. It doesn't replace banking. It augments it. It makes it transparent. It makes it accountable. And that's a different thing, but it's a good thing. On top of that, we have this whole new system that can grow things that none of us have ever imagined. Imagine now you can charge fractions of a fraction of a cent for access to something. Your transactional cost, Coasian economics here, if your transactional costs are close to zero, it changes everything. And I can't tell you how that will change. I just know it will. If you have all the audit records, it changes everything. And I don't know what will evolve. A more honest system, yes, but I can't tell you what the world will be in 50 years.
I know not the answer that I was looking for, but you're sort of grouping governments with banks as if they're the same thing. And
But you're talking about monetary policy.
okay,
The Fed isn't government. I know everyone loves to say they are. They're 13 independent banks that are partly owned. Monetary policy isn't government. Everyone gets that wrong. Banks issue monetary policy. Banks might be dictated to by governments to an extent, especially when they screw up and they owe money, as we saw a little while ago. But central banks don't detail everything that's going to happen because there's no world currency. The Japanese can't make people buy yen. No matter what the central bank here does, they can't make people buy yen. They can promise all they want, they can issue bonds, they can't make people buy it. So Bitcoin will enable yen on top of Bitcoin, and it'll be faster. It will settle thousands of times faster than SWIFT. It'll be infinitely more secure than SWIFT. It'll allow traceability better than SWIFT. It'll enable security to credit cards in a way that no one's ever done before. It'll enable us to monitor credit rates and everything like that to a fine degree that no one has ever imagined was possible. And that'll change everything. Again, I keep saying this, but it will.
Sorry, my last question. There is misconception among people that they focus on Bitcoin, digital currency, but it's very difficult for them to understand. This is a manifestation of a technology, which is blockchain. And blockchain is essential. It's almost like you're talking about the theory of Einstein, and which developed maybe atomic energy and many, many other things. So how can you explain that to people that blockchain is different? It's the base, and how you can...
Blockchain is
simply.
Bitcoin.
Yeah.
You don't split them. And you can't have multiple blockchains. Multiple blockchains end in a world where Enron exists and Bernie Madoff exists. If governments issue a company certificate, and that can be provably linked to every transaction, then you can have one set of books. You can have one set of books provably for the first time in human history. Enron occurred because they had books for their investors, separate ones. They had books for the accountants, they had a set of books for the executives, they had a set of books for the government, and they were all different. Bernie Madoff existed because he had a back room that kept track of what was really happening, and he had one set of books for